welcome to the Quantum Fit Podcast. I'm Taylor and I'm your host. This podcast is all about looking at quantum physics and quantum biology and trying to apply them to our health and fitness. This gives us a holistic view of how environmental factors such as EMF, sunlight, cold, things like that, play a major role in your overall health. Not just exercise and diet and, developing good habits. If you want to really make lasting changes in how you feel, think, and act, then I suggest you listen closely and try to have an open mind to what I have to say. Every day I'll be giving you a quick 7 to 15 minute long podcast that is both informative and to the point, so that you don't feel overwhelmed with information like some of the other podcasts that are out there. The ones that can be about an hour, hour and a half, sometimes 2, even 3 hours long. Because I know most of you probably don't have the time to listen to them, or you just get overwhelmed. Now, there's one thing. With this podcast, I don't do any kind of advertisements. So instead, I ask that you share this podcast with a friend or family member if you enjoyed the message and gained something from it. I want to be able to spread quality and easy to understand content that everybody can take and use something from it in their daily lives. I can't do that without your help, so I would highly appreciate it. Now, on to the podcast episode. Today, I'm calling it Dopamine Drives Decisions. So all about dopamine and how it affects pretty much everything that we do and the way we think. So first of all, dopamine is one of the key hormones in regulating the circadian rhythm, which means it's going to play a major factor in all of your hormones overall throughout the day and throughout night. Dopamine plays a big role in physical movement, literally any kind of movement. Dopamine helps send those signals. Dopamine also is responsible for our ability to pay attention, ability to learn new things, critical thinking skills, and regulating emotional responses. So those are pretty big things. And dopamine, from what I can tell, dopamine works in either an upwards or a downward spiral when it comes to our lives. So here's what I mean. When we have low dopamine, we naturally seek to stay either within our comfort zone or actually reduce it. And we actually become worse at making decisions as time goes on. This is how people get into that negative spiral where, you've seen it before, I'm sure. The decisions they make just keep getting worse and worse and worse. But to them, it seems like they're making good decisions. But it's actually an illusion. Because the low dopamine, regardless of what your dopamine level is, your brain will get to a point where it thinks that it's making an optimal decision. But if you have low dopamine, your brain is only capable of making low quality decisions. And the only people that can tell you're making, shitty decisions is people that have higher dopamine levels. So, low dopamine shows up as modern chronic diseases and people who have strong addictions, especially to technology. But of course, alcoholism or drug addiction or anything like that would count too. Addiction to video games. Also, most forms of neurodegeneration are associated with low levels of dopamine. Or another good example, I saw this video, it was really crazy, from Jack Kruse. He had shared it anyway on Facebook. And it showed a man on his phone during an armed robbery. So the guy was just staring at his phone, I think for a solid 30 seconds before the armed robber actually came into the business. I think it was a bar. Everybody else dropped to the ground when the armed robber showed up. Told everybody to get down. This guy didn't even know what the hell was going on. He didn't even pay attention to anything. And in fact, in the video, it shows the armed robber
literally walked right behind the guy to get to the cash register. And again, he didn't even notice at all. You know, he was like less than a foot away from the guy. That's a sign, that's a clear sign of extremely low dopamine levels. It makes you unable to pay attention to and react to your environment. Now, on the flip side, as we raise our dopamine, we continue to make better decisions. That's the upward spiral. This is partly how people can seem to suddenly have much better results in their life and actually approach their goals and complete their goals. They also begin dropping everything that lowers their dopamine and start seeking out things that will instead raise it or raise their base level of dopamine. Because of course there's things like, again, a good example is like video games can spike your dopamine, but overall it lowers your base level of dopamine. High dopamine levels are, people with high dopamine are going to have the exact opposite outcome of people with low dopamine. They tend to be highly successful, but typically humble at the same time. These people also typically go on to have very positive impacts in their tribes and in their environment. The success doesn't have to be financial, of course. It could instead be just, solving really difficult problems within the community, And another thing that's typical of people with high dopamine is that they're very intuitive, which is about everything. Whether it's, sensing other people's emotions, so actually dealing with connections with other people, or if it's making business decisions, being able to kind of forecast and see into the future. Higher dopamine levels give you the ability to do that. Again, because dopamine plays a huge role in critical thinking and regulating your emotional responses, not making decisions based solely on fear or anything like that. So they're able to see the patterns and take action on it. And to kind of sum it up and sum it all up and make it kind of easier to digest, or maybe it's a different way to look at it, I see that people who have low dopamine are naturally drawn to technology and man-made creations. Those with higher dopamine levels are attracted to nature and human connections. So one pursues this materialistic, narcissistic lifestyle, while the other lifestyle focuses on experiences and making a difference in other people's lives. Now, so far I've just talked about, the role that dopamine plays in our lives and our ability to make decisions and, what it looks like in general, generalizing. Of course, there's always exceptions. So building dopamine, of course, there's lots of different ways to do it, but in general, it's going to start with dealing with your environment, which means blocking blue light at the proper times, like I talked about in my previous podcast, reducing time on and the time you're around technology, such as Wi-Fi, phones, computer, etc., getting out into the environment. So whether it's cold outside or sun is shining and it's summer, you need to get outside as often as possible because that will raise your dopamine. And then also, as far as the diet goes, having a diet that is more animal product based with an emphasis on seafood especially will be fantastic for building dopamine because the specific biochemicals and minerals that are in seafood naturally build lots and lots of dopamine. Alright, well, that's all that I have for this episode, so thanks for listening, guys. If you have a question for me and you're listening to me on the app Anchor, please feel free to send me a voice message so that I can get an idea for a podcast episode I can do in the future. Alright, you'll hear me on the next podcast tomorrow. See ya.